In a world that seems to be constantly demanding our energy, have you ever felt that your own inner peace is the last thing on your to-do list? We spend our lives building things, a career, a home, a family. We meet our obligations, we navigate the endless stream of challenges and triumphs, we gather decades of experience. You would think that after all this time, after all the lessons learned, we would feel more solid, more grounded in ourselves than ever before. But for so many of us, if we're being truly honest, the opposite can feel true. It can feel as though the more we've seen, the more fragile we've become. We find ourselves more easily unsettled, not less. Our peace can be disrupted by a piece of breaking news, a thoughtless comment from a stranger, or the anxieties of the people we love. We build strong outer lives, yet our inner world can often feel like it's built on sand, vulnerable to the changing tides of daily events. We are taught to look outside of ourselves for answers, for the next accomplishment, the next purchase, the next distraction that promises to make us feel whole. But it never truly lasts. What if the blueprint for a truly resilient mind, an unshakable inner peace, wasn't created in our modern, noisy world at all? What if it was carefully crafted, tested, and perfected thousands of years ago, by men who faced plagues, wars, and the burdens of leading an empire? This is the quiet promise of Stoicism. It is not a trendy life hack or a quick fix. It is a timeless map, a profound and practical philosophy for navigating our inner world with grace and with a strength that doesn't need to shout. It teaches us how to find sanctuary within our own minds, regardless of the chaos outside. In this video, we will walk through 8 of its most essential lessons. These are not brutal, unforgiving rules. They are 8 profound truths, drawn from the wisdom of great thinkers and, as we will see, often supported by the discoveries of modern science. Each one is a guidepost, designed to help you build an unshakable mind, a mind that is not hard and brittle, but resilient and calm. So, before we begin this journey together, I invite you to subscribe. You are not just watching another video, you are joining a community of thinkers, people who believe that it is never too late to cultivate a life of deeper purpose and lasting inner peace. Now, let's explore the first truth. Truth number 1, embrace discomfort as a teacher. Let's start with a truth that might be a little hard to hear in our modern world. Comfort, the very thing we spend our lives chasing, is not always our best friend. Our culture celebrates ease. We have engineered countless technologies to remove friction from our daily lives. From doorstep deliveries to instant connections with anyone in the world, we have become masters of avoiding inconvenience. But in the process, we have inadvertently eliminated one of the most essential ingredients for human growth, purposeful discomfort. Imagine an over-manicured garden. Every weed is instantly pulled, the soil is always perfectly moist, and not a single strong wind is ever allowed to pass through. The plants in that garden may look perfect, but they are weak. Their roots are shallow, their stems fragile. When a real storm comes, one that can't be predicted or controlled, they are the first to break. Our minds work in much the same way. When we shield ourselves from every minor discomfort, we don't actually become stronger, we simply become less accustomed to dealing with hardship. The ancient Stoic philosophers understood this profoundly. They didn't see discomfort as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a necessary teacher, a sparring partner for the soul. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with war, plague, and personal betrayal, wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." For him, every challenge wasn't an interruption to his life, it was his life. It was an opportunity to practice patience, courage, and resilience. He understood that a mind that has never been tested is a mind that is unprepared. Amazingly, this ancient wisdom is now being powerfully confirmed by modern science. Biologists have a term for this phenomenon, hormesis. It's a fundamental principle that shows a small dose of a stressor, not enough to cause harm, actually stimulates the body and makes it stronger and more resilient to future, larger doses. You're already familiar with this concept, probably without realizing it. When you lift weights, you are intentionally creating microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. It is the process of repairing that minor damage that makes the muscle grow bigger and stronger. A vaccine introduces a weakened version of a pathogen into your body, not to make you sick, but to train your immune system to recognize and fight off the real invader. Purposeful discomfort is a vaccine for the mind. By voluntarily facing small, controlled challenges, we build the psychological resilience to handle the big, unavoidable storms of life. Consider the story of Robert, a 65-year-old man who had run a family woodworking shop for 40 years. His son, David, had been working with him for the past decade, and Robert knew in his heart it was time for him to step back and let David take over. But the conversation terrified him. It wasn't just about the business, it was about his identity, about admitting a chapter of his life was closing. For months, he avoided it. He found reasons to delay, created unnecessary tasks, and maintained a safe but increasingly distant relationship with his son. This avoidance, this choice for short-term comfort, was creating a low-grade tension that permeated their home and their workshop. Finally, after reading about this idea of facing discomfort, Robert decided to act. He asked David out for coffee one morning, his heart pounding in his chest. The conversation was initially awkward. Robert fumbled with his words about legacy, about change. There were moments of difficult silence. But as he pushed through, leaning into the initial discomfort, something shifted. David, rather than being eager to push his father out, expressed his own fears about not being able to fill his shoes. The discomfort of the conversation opened the door for honesty. They talked for 2 hours, not just as colleagues, but as father and son. When they left, the weight Robert had been carrying for months was gone, replaced by a sense of relief and a deeper connection with his son. That discomfort, when faced, became the path to freedom and understanding. Or think of Carol, a 70-year-old former librarian who had always been intimidated by technology. After her husband passed away, she felt isolated. Her grandchildren communicated through apps she didn't understand, and the world seemed to be operating in a foreign, digital language. She could have easily continued her life, relying on familiar routines. But instead, she chose the harder path. She signed up for a beginner's digital photography class at the local community center. The first few weeks were deeply frustrating. She struggled with menus, buttons, and software. She felt like the oldest and slowest person in the class. Many times, she wanted to quit, to retreat to the comfort of her books and her garden. But she told herself that this frustration was the exercise. Every time she figured out a new setting, it was a small victory. Gradually, slowly, her confusion began to give way to curiosity, and then to confidence. She started taking her camera on her walks, seeing her world in a new way, looking for light and composition. She wasn't just learning to use a camera, she was rewiring her brain, forging new neural pathways. She began sharing her photos with her grandchildren, creating a bridge between their generations. The discomfort of learning a new skill hadn't just given her a hobby, it had given her a new sense of competence and a new way to connect with the world and the people she loved. Both Robert and Carol embody this Stoic truth. They didn't wait for life to force hardship upon them. They chose it. They understood, consciously or not, that growth is not found in the center of our comfort zone. It's found at the edges, where we stretch ourselves just a little bit beyond what we think we can handle. So, what does this mean for us, right here, right now? It doesn't mean we should seek out unnecessary danger. It means we should start looking at the small discomforts of daily life as opportunities. It might be choosing the stairs instead of the elevator. It might be initiating the conversation you've been putting off. It might be turning off the television and sitting in silence with your own thoughts for 10 minutes. It could be reading a book that challenges your long-held views. Every time we choose the slightly harder path, we are casting a vote for a stronger future version of ourselves. We are training our minds not to panic at the first sign of a challenge. We are reminding ourselves, at the most fundamental level, that we are capable of doing hard things. And that strength, built through hundreds of small, intentional choices, becomes the bedrock that holds firm when the real storms of life arrive. Our greatest teacher is often not the one who brings us comfort, but the one who shows us the strength we never knew we had. Truth number 2, observe your emotions, don't be ruled by them. If the first truth taught us how to face the external world, this second truth turns our attention inward, to one of the most complex and turbulent landscapes any of us will ever have to navigate, our own emotions. Let's be honest for a moment. How many times has a perfectly good day been derailed by a sudden emotional wave? Maybe it was a thoughtless remark from a friend, a frustration when a plan fell through, or a sudden surge of anxiety about the future. Like a ship without a rudder, we can be carried away by these currents, tossed from anger to sadness, from worry to guilt, often before we even realize what's happening. In those moments, we don't feel like we have an emotion, we feel like we are the emotion. They become our master, and we are the unwilling servants to their volatile commands. But the Stoics made a revolutionary distinction, a simple but powerful idea that can completely change our relationship with our inner life. Epictetus, a philosopher who was once a slave, said it most concisely, "It is not things that upset us, but our judgment about things." Take a moment to really let that sink in. It's not an intellectual exercise, it's a key to a prison door. The Stoics recognize that there is a gap, a tiny but all-important space, that exists between what happens to us and how we respond to it. In that space lies our power. The thing itself, a word, an event, a diagnosis, is neutral. It's just raw data. The emotion we feel comes not from that data, but from the story we immediately tell ourselves about it. When someone cuts you off in traffic, the anger doesn't come from the other car, it comes from the thought, "That person disrespected me. What a selfish jerk." When a loved one doesn't call you back, the feeling of hurt doesn't come from the silent phone, it comes from the judgment, "They don't care about me." This is a profound and somewhat difficult truth to accept. In most cases, we are not reacting to reality, we are reacting to our own self-generated story. What's incredible is that this ancient idea, formed in the marketplaces of Athens and the halls of Rome, is so powerful that it became the foundation for one of the most effective and proven tools in modern psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT is, in its essence, the clinical application of Stoic wisdom. It operates on the principle that by learning to identify, question, and change our automatic thoughts and beliefs, our judgments, we can change the way we feel. It is not about ignoring or suppressing emotions. Quite the opposite. It's about becoming a curious detective of your own feelings, tracing them back to their source and deciding consciously whether or not they serve you. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally wise. Consider the story of Eleanor, a 71-year-old newly retired English teacher. She had loved her job, and retirement, though expected, left a void in her life. One afternoon, she was on the phone with her daughter, Jessica, who was describing a stressful week at work. Casually, Jessica said, "Oh man, Mom, you're so lucky you have all this free time." Instantly, a cold, prickly feeling washed over Eleanor. The moment Jessica's words ended, the story in Eleanor's head began. "She thinks I'm useless. She thinks my life is empty and without purpose now. She must see me as a burden, just sitting around all day while she works so hard." The wave of self-pity and resentment hit. The call ended quickly, and Eleanor spent the rest of the day in a dark mood. For the next few days, her texts to Jessica were curt. Jessica, unaware of the internal storm she had accidentally triggered, was confused and hurt by her mother's coldness. A single, offhand comment had created a rift in their relationship, all of it happening inside Eleanor's mind. Now, let's rewind that scenario and give Eleanor the Stoic toolkit. Jessica says the exact same sentence, "Oh man, Mom, you're so lucky you have all this free time." This time, as the initial prickly feeling arises, Eleanor doesn't get swept away by it. Instead, she creates space. She observes it. She says to herself, "Ah, there is that feeling of being hurt. Interesting. What thought caused that feeling?" She identifies the thought, "My daughter thinks I'm useless." Then, she takes the next step, she questions that thought. Is that thought 100% true? What evidence do I have? The truth was, Jessica only said she had a lot of free time. That was an objective fact. The whole story about being useless and a burden was an interpretation, a story she added. Is there another way of looking at this? Eleanor wonders. Maybe she's just genuinely tired and expressing a wish for some rest. Maybe it's a clumsy way of saying she wants to connect and hear about my life. Maybe she's even a little jealous. By detaching the event from the judgment, she reclaimed her power. She was no longer a victim of her own story. Instead, she could respond from a place of wisdom and love. She took a deep breath and said, "I do, honey." It's a big adjustment. Sometimes I don't know what to do with it all. But it does mean I'm free to come visit you and the grandkids more often. In a moment, the potential rift was healed and turned into a bridge. No resentment, no misunderstanding. Just truth and connection. This is the daily practice of a Stoic. It doesn't require hours of meditation on a mountaintop. It can be practiced in the middle of your life. The next time you feel a strong negative emotion, anger, jealousy, fear, try this simple 3-step process. 1. Pause. Just stop. Don't speak. Don't act. Take one deep breath. Create a gap of just 3 seconds. This pause is where your freedom begins. 2. Observe. Name the emotion. Say in your head, "This is anger." Then, look for the thought that triggered it. I am feeling angry because I am believing that this person intentionally disrespected me. Separate them, the feeling and the thought behind it. 3. Question. Gently interrogate the thought. Is that the only possible interpretation? Is there another possibility? Maybe they are having a bad day. Maybe they weren't thinking of me at all. Is holding on to this anger actually helping me? This practice, which might feel unnatural at first, will, over time, change the way your brain is wired. It weakens the automatic pathways of reaction and builds new pathways of conscious choice. It doesn't eliminate your emotions, life would be bland without them. Instead, it allows you to experience the full spectrum of human feeling without becoming a slave to it. You learn to let the waves of emotion pass through you, instead of letting them sweep you away. This is one of the most profound forms of freedom a person can achieve, the power to decide who is in charge of your own inner world. Truth number 3, let go of the expectation of fairness. Of all the burdens we place upon ourselves, there is perhaps none so heavy and so subtle as the expectation that life should be fair. From a young age, this concept is drilled into us. From the playground to the boardroom, we carry an internal yardstick, constantly measuring events against a scale of fairness. We believe that if we work hard, we will succeed. If we are kind to people, they will be kind to us in return. If we live a good life, we will be shielded from the worst tragedies. It's an unwritten contract we believe we've signed with the universe. But then life happens. A friend you went out of your way to help betrays your trust. A less competent colleague gets the promotion. An illness strikes without reason or explanation. A loved one is taken far too soon. In those moments, our contract with the universe feels like it's been torn to shreds. The first reaction, almost instinctual, is a cry from the depths of our soul, "It's not fair." That cry carries with it anger, bitterness, and a profound sense of personal betrayal. We feel as though the rules of the game have been violated, and we are the victim of some cosmic injustice. This expectation of fairness, while born from a noble desire for an ordered and moral world, can become a source of chronic suffering. It tethers our happiness to a condition that lies outside of our control, the behavior of the world. The Stoics recognized this trap thousands of years ago. They were not pessimists, they were radical realists. They understood that the universe does not operate according to human rules of fairness. The universe simply operates. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. Storms do not check the moral resume of a forest before they sweep through. Instead of complaining about the storm, the Stoic seeks to become a deeper-rooted tree. Imagine an ancient oak tree on a hill. It has seen hundreds of seasons, beautiful sunny days and violent storms. When a fierce wind blows, it does not scream at the sky, "This isn't fair." It does not compare itself to the trees in the sheltered valley. Instead, it does what it was built to do. It bends. It sways. And most importantly, it holds on with the strength of the roots it has driven deep into the earth over years of facing adversity. The oak does not expect ease, it has prepared for difficulty. Its strength comes not from the absence of storms, but from its capacity to endure them. This is the model for human resilience. When we let go of the demand that life be fair, we do not become cynical or accepting of injustice. We simply shift our focus. Instead of looking outward and trying to police the world, we look inward and focus on the only thing we can truly control, our own response. Consider the story of Michael, a 68-year-old architect who had spent his life building a small but reputable firm. He was a man of integrity, always putting his clients first and treating his employees fairly. He and his wife, Sarah, had planned for a retirement they had meticulously earned, traveling, spending time with their grandchildren, and enjoying the fruits of their labor. Then, the financial crisis hit. In a matter of months, a huge portion of their retirement savings, which had been invested conservatively, evaporated due to the reckless behavior of people they had never met. Michael's initial reaction was a hot, searing anger. "We did everything right," he said to Sarah over and over. "We saved. We lived modestly. We weren't greedy. How can this happen? It's not fair." That injustice ate at him. He became irritable and bitter. Every news report about bailed-out bank executives felt like a personal knife twist. His focus on the unfairness of the situation paralyzed him, leaving him adrift in a sea of helplessness and resentment. Sarah, while just as heartbroken, had a different perspective. One evening, she sat down with Michael and said gently, "I know it's not fair, honey. I know. But is repeating that every day helping? Is it bringing our money back? Or is it just stealing our peace right now?" Her words were like a crack of light in Michael's fog of anger. He realized that his obsession with fairness wasn't punishing the people who caused the crisis, it was only punishing him and Sarah. It was turning their golden years into a bitter experience. That night, he made a decision. He would not let the world's unfairness define his happiness. The next day, he sat down and made a list. Not a list of what was lost, but a list of what remained: their health, their love for each other, their children and grandchildren, his skills, his reputation. He realized he still had a great deal. He decided to take on a few small consulting projects, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of strength. He found he actually enjoyed the work in a way he hadn't in years, free from the pressure of running a firm. They readjusted their retirement plans. Instead of lavish European trips, they bought a used RV and explored the national parks. They found that the joy wasn't in the amount of money they spent, but in the time they spent together. Michael never came to say that what happened was fair. But he stopped letting it control him. By accepting the reality of the situation and focusing on what he could do, he reclaimed his agency. He turned a paralyzing injustice into a lesson in resilience and redefined success on his own terms. This is a profound lesson for all of us. Life will continue to present events that seem unfair. Health can fail. People can disappoint us. Bad things can happen to good people. Every time they do, we have a choice. We can scream at the storm, exhausting our energy in anger and resentment. Or we can take a deep breath, accept that we do not control the storm, and then turn to strengthening our own roots. Letting go of the expectation of fairness doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming strategically wise. It means conserving your emotional energy for what truly matters: your actions, your attitude, and the people you love. It means understanding that true strength is found not in getting a life free from challenges, but in meeting those challenges with dignity and grace. The next time you find yourself thinking, "This isn't fair," try adding a phrase to the end of it, "And now, what am I going to do about it?" In that question, you will find the path away from resentment and toward freedom. Truth number 4, master your inner world, focus on what you can control. Imagine you are the captain of a ship on the open sea. One day, the sky darkens and a violent storm descends. The waves are like mountains, the wind is a screaming fury, and the rain lashes down without mercy. In that moment, as the captain, what can you control? You cannot control the storm. You cannot command the wind to stop or the waves to cease. To scream at the sky or curse the weather would be a futile waste of energy. The only thing you can control is how you steer your ship. You control the rudder. You control the sails. You control the calm and resolve of your crew. Your entire survival depends on focusing all your energy and attention on that small but vital sphere of control, and accepting the reality of the storm without resistance. This metaphor is the very essence of the most important teaching of Stoicism, the dichotomy of control. The Stoics believed that the entire human experience could be divided into two categories: things that are within our control, and things that are not. The things outside of our control include almost everything in the external world: the weather, the economy, the actions of other people, our reputation, our health, to a degree, and our own mortality. To try and control these things is as pointless as trying to command the storm. It is a surefire recipe for frustration, anxiety, and a feeling of powerlessness. So, what are we left with? What resides in our small circle of control? The Stoic answer is both humble and incredibly empowering: we control our judgments, our opinions, our choices, and our actions. In short, we control our inner world. Our power lies not in changing the world to fit our desires, but in changing our responses to fit the reality of the world. Once again, this ancient wisdom is stunningly confirmed by modern psychology. Researchers have a term for this idea: the locus of control. People with an external locus of control tend to believe that their lives are determined by outside factors: luck, fate, powerful others. They often feel like victims of circumstance. In contrast, people with an internal locus of control believe they have personal agency and can influence the outcomes of their lives through their own choices and efforts. The research is undeniable. A major study published in the journals of gerontology, one of the leading journals in aging, found that older adults with a stronger internal locus of control report significantly higher life satisfaction, fewer depressive symptoms, and better overall physical health. This is not just philosophy, it is a scientifically validated blueprint for a healthier, happier life as we age. Consider the story of Susan, a 69-year-old former accountant who had always prided herself on her active lifestyle. She loved gardening, hiking, and playing with her grandchildren. Then, during a routine checkup, she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic autoimmune condition that can cause pain and joint damage. Initially, the diagnosis shattered her world. Her entire focus was on what she couldn't control. She obsessed over the disease itself. Why me? What did I do wrong? She asked herself over and over. She worried incessantly about the future: would the pain get worse? Would she still be able to garden? Would she become a burden on her family? She read horror stories online about worst-case scenarios. This focus on external factors, the disease itself, the uncertain future, sent her into a spiral of anxiety and helplessness. She felt like a victim of her own body, a prisoner in her own home. After several weeks of despair, a close friend came to visit. The friend, who had been living with diabetes for years, listened to Susan's fears and then gently asked, "In all of this, Susan, what is actually in your hands?" The question stopped Susan in her tracks. It was so simple, yet so profound. That night, for the first time in weeks, she stopped thinking about what she couldn't change and started thinking about what she could. She took out a piece of paper and drew a line down the middle. On one side, she wrote, "Outside my control, the diagnosis, the progression of the disease, other people's reactions." On the other side, she wrote, within my control. At first, the second column was blank. But then, she started to write. The questions I ask my doctor. She could prepare for her appointments, becoming an active advocate for her own health. My adherence to my treatment plan. She could take her medication on time and do the recommended therapies. My diet. She began researching foods that could help reduce inflammation. My exercise. The doctor had mentioned water aerobics. She could sign up for a class at the community center. My attitude. This was the big one. She realized she could choose to see herself as a sick person or as a person who was actively managing a health condition. This shift in mindset changed everything. It didn't make the arthritis disappear, but it made the helplessness disappear. Susan sprang into action. She became an expert on her condition. She joined an aqua aerobics class and was amazed to find it not only helped her joints but introduced her to a new group of friends. She experimented with anti-inflammatory recipes, turning her kitchen into a laboratory for wellness. Most importantly, she changed her story. When people asked about her arthritis, instead of saying, "It's awful, I can't do anything anymore," she said, "It's a challenge, but I'm learning to work with it. I'm feeling stronger every day." By shifting her focus to her circle of control, Susan turned a prison of fear into an opportunity for growth. She built an inner citadel, as the Stoics would call it, a place of peace and purpose that no diagnosis or external circumstance could touch. This is an exercise we can all practice. The next time you feel overwhelmed by a problem, be it health, finances, or a relationship, try this. Take a quiet moment with a piece of paper. Draw a large circle. Inside that circle, write down all the aspects of the problem you can directly control: your actions, your words, your attitude, your choices. Outside the circle, write down all the things you cannot control: the final outcome, other people's feelings, past events. Now, look at the paper. Make a conscious decision to devote 100% of your mental and emotional energy to the things inside the circle. Let go of the things on the outside. Drop them like you would drop a rope that was burning your hands. You will feel an almost immediate shift. The feeling of being overwhelmed begins to dissolve, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. This is where your true power resides. Not in trying to bend the world to your will, but in mastering your own inner world with wisdom and dignity. Truth number 5, practice voluntary hardship to strengthen the mind. If the previous truths have taught us how to face the challenges life throws at us, this truth asks us to do something even more radical, to actively seek them out. At first, this sounds strange, even masochistic. Why would anyone, especially those who have worked hard their whole lives to achieve comfort and security, intentionally seek out difficulty? The Stoic answer is profound: we don't do this to punish ourselves. We do this to inoculate ourselves. Think of it as a fire drill for the soul. Nobody actually wants to do a fire drill. It's disruptive. It's inconvenient. But we do it so that when there's a real fire, we are not paralyzed by panic and fear. We've practiced the steps. Our body and mind know what to do. Voluntary hardship works in the same way. By willingly experiencing small, controlled versions of deprivation, we are vaccinating ourselves against the fear of loss and difficulty. We are training our nervous system to recognize that we are far more resilient than we think. Seneca, one of the most brilliant Stoic writers, practiced this rigorously. He would set aside several days each month to live as if he were in poverty. He would eat the simplest of meals, a bit of hard bread, some water. He would wear his roughest, oldest clothes. He would sleep on the hard, cold floor, foregoing his comfortable bed. He did this not out of self-hatred, but to ask himself a fundamental question: is this the condition that I so feared? And the answer he found, time and time again, was no. He realized he could not only survive but find peace and clarity even in the most deprived circumstances. After a few days of this practice, when he returned to his normal life, everything was felt with a renewed appreciation. A simple meal became a feast. A warm blanket felt like the ultimate luxury. By temporarily giving up his comforts, he stopped taking them for granted. More importantly, he disarmed fear of its power. The fear of losing his wealth no longer haunted him, because he had proven to himself that he didn't need it for his inner peace. In our modern world, we don't need to live like hermits to apply this powerful principle. There are many practical and safe ways to introduce voluntary hardship into our lives, especially as we get older and perhaps more set in our comfortable routines. One modern example is intermittent fasting. While often promoted as a weight loss tool, its psychological benefits can be even more profound. By actively choosing to skip a meal and sit with the mild sensation of hunger, we are teaching our body and mind a crucial lesson: a craving is not an emergency. We learn to differentiate between "I want" and "I need." Furthermore, modern science is beginning to discover what ancient sages knew: these periods of controlled stress like fasting can trigger cellular repair processes in the body, a process called autophagy, and may even enhance the growth of new brain cells. So, the temporary discomfort of hunger can be a direct investment in your long-term brain and body health. Another practice can be cold exposure. This doesn't mean you have to plunge into a frozen lake. It can be as simple as ending a warm shower with 30 seconds of cool or cold water. Your body's initial reaction is one of shock and resistance. Your mind will scream, "Turn it off." But by holding your ground, breathing through it, and enduring that discomfort, you are performing a powerful act of self-mastery. You are starting your day with a clear victory over the weaker part of yourself, the part that always seeks ease. It's like a shot of espresso for your willpower, leaving you feeling alert, alive, and capable. Consider the story of Arthur, a 72-year-old retired executive who had spent his life flying business class and staying in luxury hotels. His life was optimized for comfort. But in retirement, he felt a restlessness, a sense that he had grown soft. He read about Seneca's practice and, though skeptical at first, decided to try his own version. He called it his minimalist weekend. One weekend a month, he would move into his guest room. He slept not in his plush bed, but in a sleeping bag on the floor. He turned off his smartphone and put it in a drawer. Instead of watching the news on a massive TV, he reread old books by the light of a simple lamp. He ate the simplest meals he could devise: oatmeal, bean soup, apples. The first time he tried it, it was miserable. His back ached. He felt bored and restless. He missed his good coffee and the comfort of his armchair. But as the weekend wore on, something interesting happened. The silence stopped being boredom, it became peace. The taste of a simple apple became incredibly intense. He read a book with a focus he hadn't had in years. On Monday morning, when he returned to his normal life, it was a revelation. The hot water from the shower felt like a miracle. The smell of fresh coffee was magnificent. His bed felt like a cloud. That short, voluntary hardship had completely recalibrated his system of appreciation. It didn't just make him grateful for what he had, it gave him a quiet confidence. He knew that if everything went away, if life changed suddenly, he would be okay. He had tasted simplicity and found that it was not to be feared. In fact, there was a kind of freedom in it. This is the core of this fifth truth. We don't practice hardship to become miserable. We practice it to become invincible to the fear of misery. Every time we choose the slightly harder path, we are weakening the power that comfort and convenience have over us. We are proving to ourselves that our happiness and peace are not dependent on external conditions. They come from within. So, find your own voluntary hardship. It could be taking a walk when you could drive. It could be a day of no complaining. It could be learning a new skill that makes you feel clumsy and incompetent at first. Pick something that challenges you safely. Face it. Learn from it. You will not only build a stronger will, you will discover a new and more durable source of happiness, the happiness that comes from gratitude, a deep joy in knowing you have everything you truly need right here, right now. Truth number 6, love the process, not the prize. Our society is obsessed with outcomes. From a young age, we are taught to keep our eyes on the finish line, the final grade, the diploma, the job title, the bigger house, the bank balance. We live in a culture of, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when the kids are settled. I'll be happy when I retire. We turn life into a series of goals to be conquered, and we believe that true joy lies in the moment we achieve them. But there is a critical flaw in this approach. First, it places our happiness in an uncertain future, one that may never arrive in the way we imagine. Second, and more importantly, it ties our worth to things that are outside of our complete control. You can be the hardest worker, but the project might still fail. You can be the best parent, but your children will still face their own struggles. You can plan the perfect retirement, but health or circumstances can change. When we live only for the prize, we set ourselves up for disappointment and a sense of failure. We spend the vast majority of our lives in the pursuit, rather than in the living. The Stoics proposed a different path, one that is far more durable and peaceful. They taught that true satisfaction is found not in the result, but in our dedication to the process. It's found in performing the action in front of us with as much focus, integrity, and excellence as we can muster. Because while the outcome is never guaranteed, our effort and our intention are always within our control. Think of a master potter at her wheel. Her joy is not confined to the moment she pulls a perfect pot from the kiln. If it were, most of her time would be one of frustration and waiting. No, her true joy is in the process itself. It's in the feeling of the wet clay gliding through her fingers. It's in the meditative focus required to center the clay. It's in the gentle, controlled pressure of shaping the walls of the pot. It's in the skill, patience, and attention she brings to each moment. Every action is performed with care and purpose. The beautiful final pot is not the sole goal, it's a natural byproduct of a process that was loved and honored. The potter finds meaning in the work, not just in the fruit of the work. This is a profound shift in how we approach life. It invites us to find the sacred in the ordinary, to find joy in the effort, and to find value in who we become along the way, not just in where we arrive. Consider the story of Margaret, a 67-year-old retired hospital administrator. She was a woman who had lived her entire life by goals and deadlines. Efficiency and achievement were her language. Upon retiring, she decided to take on a project she had put off for decades, writing her family history, a chronicle for her children and grandchildren. Initially, she approached it just as she would have run a hospital department. She created a project chart, set timelines, and focused entirely on the end product, a beautiful, hardbound, completed book. She imagined the pride of handing it to her family. But this obsession with the outcome made the process miserable. Every time she sat down at the blank screen, she felt overwhelmed by the scale of the task. The entire history of a family seemed too big to begin. She would write a few sentences, feel they were imperfect, and then give up in frustration. Procrastination became her constant companion. The joy of the project was being replaced by the pressure of finishing it. Her dream book was becoming a source of daily anxiety. After months of struggling, on the verge of giving up completely, she complained to a friend in her book club. The friend listened patiently and then asked a simple question, "Margaret, why don't you forget about writing a book? Instead, why don't you just spend an hour each morning, remembering?" That question changed everything. The next day, Margaret sat down at her desk with a new goal. Not, write chapter 1. Just, spend 1 hour with my family's past. She started by pulling out an old shoebox filled with black and white photos. She didn't try to sort them chronologically. She simply picked each one up, letting the memories surface. She remembered the smell of her grandmother's apple pie. She smiled at her father's goofy haircut in a youthful picture. She started writing, not for publication, but just to capture these memories as they arose. She wrote a paragraph about her first fishing trip. She wrote about the way her mother used to hum while she gardened. She called her brother in another state, not to interview him, but just to ask, "Hey, do you remember that time we tried to build a tent in the backyard?" Their conversation lasted 2 hours, filled with laughter and long-forgotten details. Margaret fell in love with the process. She realized that the true purpose of this project wasn't to produce a physical object. It was the chance to relive and reconnect with her roots. Her mornings were no longer a struggle, they became a rich ritual. She found joy in the discovery, in the conversation, in the simple act of bringing the ghosts of memory into the light. An ironic thing happened. By letting go of her attachment to the outcome, she became more productive than ever. The pages began to fill up, not out of pressure, but as a natural outflow of joy and discovery. A year later, she had a thick, rich, and vibrant manuscript, far more authentic than anything her initial project plan could have produced. When she did hand the bound books to her family, it was a proud moment. But she realized the true prize wasn't the book in their hands. The true prize was the hundreds of hours she had spent loving the process, hours that had enriched her understanding of herself and her family. This lesson is not just for big projects. It applies to the fabric of everyday life. We can bring the spirit of the craftsman to preparing a meal, focusing on the colors and textures of the vegetables instead of just rushing to get it done. We can bring it to a conversation, listening fully instead of just waiting for our turn to speak. We can bring it to a walk, noticing the way the light filters through the leaves instead of just thinking about the destination. When you find satisfaction in your effort itself, in the focus, the care, the dedication you bring to the present moment, you become immune to disappointment. If the project succeeds, that's wonderful. If it fails, you still have the satisfaction of knowing you gave it your best. You always win, because your victory is defined by your own actions, the only thing you can truly control. This is freedom from the judgment of the external world. It is finding a wholeness that is not dependent on applause or success, but simply on a job well done and a life fully lived. Truth number 7, remember that life is finite to live more deeply. In our modern culture, we have become experts at avoiding one inescapable truth, our own mortality. We speak of death in whispers, use gentle euphemisms, and treat it as a medical failure rather than a natural, integral part of life. We act as if we have an infinite number of days stretching out before us, a seemingly endless supply of time. We put off the important phone calls, we hold on to petty grudges, and we waste precious hours on trivialities, all under the unspoken assumption that there's always tomorrow. The Stoics saw this in a completely different light. They did not run from death. They confronted it. They had a phrase for this practice, Memento Mori, a Latin phrase that means, remember you will die. For them, this was not a morbid or pessimistic thought. Quite the opposite. It was a powerful tool, an antidote to wastefulness, and the secret to living a life of purpose and vitality. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote it over and over in his journal as a reminder to himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Think about the weight of that sentence. It is not a threat, but an invitation to clarity. If you truly and fully accepted that your time on this earth is limited and unpredictable, what would change? The small daily worries, the annoyances, the preoccupations with status and material things, they all begin to shrink and lose their power. They are like clouds that burn away in the face of the sun. And what is left, in that clear light, is what truly matters. Modern science, once again, is catching up to this ancient wisdom. In a field called existential psychology, studies have explored what happens when people are subtly reminded of their own mortality. The results are remarkable. People don't become despondent. Instead, they tend to shift their priorities. They become less interested in extrinsic goals like wealth or fame, and more interested in intrinsic goals, meaningful relationships, personal growth, and contributing to their community. The awareness of death doesn't extinguish life, it focuses it. It acts as a filter, stripping away the non-essential and leaving only what truly nourishes the soul. Consider the story of George, a 73-year-old retired civil engineer. George was in good health, but his life had fallen into a rut of complacency. Every day was nearly identical. He would wake up, read the news, spend several hours watching political news channels, complain about the state of the world, and go to bed. He was existing, but he wasn't truly living. Years earlier, he'd had a foolish argument with his daughter, Emily, over an issue he couldn't even clearly remember now. Pride had kept both of them from making amends, and their relationship had become a distant silence, punctuated only by stilted holiday phone calls. George held on to that grudge like a shield, a way to feel right, while the years quietly slipped by. Then one day, he got a call. His best friend from high school, a man named Frank with whom he still played golf every month, had died suddenly of a heart attack. Frank was also 73, also seemingly healthy. Death was no longer an abstract concept, something that happened to other people on the news. It had knocked on his door. Frank's death shook George to his core. For the first time in years, he truly confronted his own finitude. That night, he sat alone in his quiet living room and asked himself the Marcus Aurelius question: if I could leave life right now, would I be content with how I live today? The answer was a resounding no. He thought of the hours he had spent watching the news, feeling angry at politicians he would never meet. From this new perspective, it seemed like an incredible waste of time. He thought of his broken relationship with Emily. The pride, the need to be right, which had seemed so important yesterday, now seemed petty and tragic. How many years of a father-daughter connection had he traded for a long-forgotten argument? The pain of that waste was sharper than any pain his pride could have protected him from. The awareness of death didn't paralyze George, it mobilized him. The next day, he did something different. He didn't turn on the TV. Instead, he went outside, sat on his porch, and just listened to the birds. He felt the sun on his face and, for the first time in years, felt a deep gratitude for the simple fact of being alive. Then, with his heart pounding, he picked up the phone and called Emily. When she answered, he didn't try to argue or place blame. He just said, his voice cracking slightly, "Emily, it's Dad. I'm calling to say I'm sorry. I was wrong. I love you, and I don't want to waste another day." There was a silence on the other end of the line, then a small sob. "I love you too, Dad," she said. The wall of ice that had been built over years began to melt in a moment of honesty fueled by Memento Mori. That week, George did more. He went to the local library and signed up to be a volunteer reader for children, something he'd always thought he'd do, someday. Someday had arrived. He started taking longer walks, not for exercise, but to really look at his neighborhood. He noticed the flowers in his neighbors' gardens, he said hello to the people he passed. George's life was transformed, not by a happy event, but by the embrace of a grim reality. The awareness of death became his counselor, his silent companion reminding him to focus on what mattered. It taught him that every day is an irreplaceable gift. Every conversation is a chance to connect. Every action is a chance to live in accordance with his values. This is the paradoxical gift of Memento Mori. It is not about living in fear of the end. It is about living with an appreciation of the present. It invites us to stop postponing our joy, to stop postponing our kindness, to stop postponing our own lives. It asks us, right now, in this very day, what will you do with this precious, finite time you have? Who will you forgive? What will you create? Who will you love? The answers to those questions, when lived fully, are the very definition of a life well lived. Truth number 8, live by your values, not for applause. Throughout our lives, we are subject to two competing calls, two compasses that often point in different directions. One is the internal compass, the quiet voice of our conscience, our core values, and our sense of what is right. The other is the external compass, the pull of approval, the desire to be liked, to be praised, and the fear of being criticized or rejected. Most of us spend our lives trying to navigate by both, constantly adjusting our course to try and please both masters. But eventually, we learn that this is impossible. Sooner or later, we come to a fork in the road where the path of integrity and the path of popularity diverge. And in that moment of choice, Stoicism offers clear and uncompromising guidance. The ultimate measure of a life well lived is not the applause of the crowd, but the approval of the person in the mirror. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. This is a statement of radical freedom. It releases us from the exhausting burden of constantly managing other people's opinions. Consider the fragility of a life built on applause. When your self-worth comes from the approval of others, you have handed over the controls of your happiness. You become a slave to their fickle opinions. You become an actor on the stage of your own life, constantly changing masks and scripts to fit the audience in front of you. With one group of friends, you might express one set of values, with another, a completely different set. Slowly, you lose track of who the real you even is. You are left with just a collection of performances. Such a life is filled with anxiety, because you are always at risk of being found out, and you are constantly worried about whether you are pleasing everyone. In contrast, consider the strength and peace that come from a life anchored in internal values. When you know what you stand for, be it honesty, compassion, responsibility, or courage, decision-making becomes much simpler. You no longer have to guess what others want you to do. You only have to ask yourself, which action is most in alignment with the person I want to be? This is about having an internal scorecard. The only approval you need to seek is that of your own best self. Such a life has a solidity, an integrity that cannot be broken. Criticism can still sting, but it cannot shatter you, because you know you acted from a place of integrity. Praise is pleasant, but you don't become dependent on it, because your worth is not derived from it. You are building your inner citadel, a place where your self-respect is safe from the changing tides of the external world. Consider the story of David, a 70-year-old retired pharmacist and board member of his local community center, an institution he had served with his whole heart for decades. The center was struggling financially, and a real estate developer made a tempting offer, to buy a parcel of land at the back of the property to build a high-end retail complex. The deal would solve all the center's financial problems for years to come, allowing them to upgrade facilities and expand programs. Most of the board members and many influential people in town were enthusiastically in favor. They saw it as a chance to modernize and secure the future. For David, voting yes would be the easiest path. He would be lauded as a pragmatic leader who saved the center. But there was a problem. David knew that land. It wasn't just an empty field. It was where the town's informal community garden was located. It was where families from the nearby apartment buildings, who had no backyards of their own, came to grow vegetables. It was where children played safely on summer afternoons. For a segment of the community, it was the only green space within walking distance. David's internal compass was screaming. One of his core values was the belief that the center existed to serve the entire community, especially those with the fewest resources. Selling off their green space in exchange for a luxury shopping area felt like a betrayal of that mission. But the external compass was pointing in the opposite direction. Voting no would get him labeled as an obstacle to progress. He would be criticized as naive, as fiscally irresponsible. He would disappoint friends and donors he had known for years. His internal struggle was intense. He spent sleepless nights weighing easy applause against a clear conscience. He thought about all we have discussed. He observed his emotions, the fear of criticism, the desire to be liked. He focused on what he could control, not the opinions of others, but his own vote. He remembered the finitude of life and asked himself what legacy he wanted to leave, a shiny building or a community that was cared for. Eventually, the choice became clear. He could not live with himself if he voted against what he believed to be right. His self-respect was more valuable than his popularity. At the board meeting, the air was thick with anticipation. After others had made compelling arguments about the financial benefits, it was David's turn to speak. He didn't speak in anger or accusation. In a calm, steady voice, he told them about what he had seen in that garden. He spoke of the children, of the senior citizens tending their tomato plants. He reminded them of the purpose for which the center was originally founded. And then he concluded, I know we need money. But we can't purchase it at the cost of our soul. For that reason, I vote no. There was a stunned silence in the room. Some people looked angry. But then, an unexpected thing happened. Another board member, a woman who was usually quiet, cleared her throat and said, David's right. I vote no as well. Emboldened, a third followed. In the end, the motion failed by a single vote. In the weeks that followed, David faced some criticism, just as he had expected. But he also received quiet thanks from people in the community whose voices were not often heard. Most importantly, for the first time in months, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had chosen the harder path, but it was his path. He had lived by his values. He might have lost a few fans, but he had kept his integrity. And he realized that the approval of his internal compass was the only applause that truly mattered. This is the culmination of the Stoic journey. It's where all the other practices lead, to building a character so solid that you can do the right thing even when it comes at a cost. It's understanding that reputation is what other people think of you, while character is who you really are. And in the game of life, it is only character that you get to take with you to the very end. As we come to the end of this exploration of these 8 truths, it's important to look back and see the golden thread that connects them all. Stoicism, in its profound wisdom, is not asking us to become hard, calloused, or unfeeling. It's not about building walls to keep life out. Quite the opposite. Building an unshakable mind is not about becoming like a rock can shatter under sudden pressure. Instead, it is about becoming like an ancient oak tree, an image we have returned to again and again. The strength of the oak is not in its rigidity. It is in its deep roots, which anchor it to the earth, giving it stability. It is in its branches, which can bend with the wind without breaking. It is in its ability to endure harsh winters and then to bud again in the spring. This is the model for an unshakable mind, a mind nourished by self-awareness, strengthened by conscious choice, and anchored by deep values. A mind that is not immune to the storms of life, but is capable of enduring them with grace and dignity. This is not a destination you arrive at overnight. There is no certificate to hang on the wall. This is a practice, a lifelong journey. There will be days when you feel like a Stoic sage, facing challenges with calm. And there will be days when you get swept away by emotion or frustration. And that's okay. The goal is not perfection, but progress. Every time you choose to observe rather than react, every time you let go of what you can't control, every time you act on your values instead of for convenience, you are sinking your roots just a little bit deeper. To solidify your own commitment on this path, I invite you to engage in a simple but powerful act. Share this affirmation in the comments below, I am becoming unshakable day by day. Writing these words is not only a reminder to yourself of the journey you are on, it is a source of encouragement for others who are on this path with you. It's a way of saying, you are not alone. And finally, if this conversation has resonated with you, if something in these words has sparked a flicker of truth within you, please like this video so that others might find it. And subscribe to continue this exploration of timeless wisdom for modern life. We are building a community of thinkers together, of seekers of inner peace in a noisy world. Remember, every day brings a new opportunity to practice. Keep building your inner citadel, not of stone and mortar, but of choice, courage, and wisdom.